as a financial advisor for over 20 years, one of the observations I've made is some of the people that are best prepared financially for retirement share a common challenge in retirement. And that is they got prepared financially by being good savers. And some people might say that they were frugal. And so the question is, if you're frugal, can you still enjoy retirement? So let's talk about this. And the question is, can you do both? Can you enjoy retirement and be frugal? So the first thing that I think is super important, if you tend to be on the frugal side, if you tend to enjoy not spending money, if you enjoy finding a deal, I think one of the most important things is to have a financial plan. Now, admittedly, I'm biased, right? This is what I do for a living, but I do think it gives people that tend to not spend as much money as they could and enjoy it. Having a financial plan gives you the freedom and gives you the confidence that you know, okay, you can spend this much money and you're still being a good steward of your money. You're not putting yourself in jeopardy. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy to spend that money, and we'll talk about that later. But the first step is to have a plan, work with a financial advisor that's a fiduciary to you. So that's number one. Number two, before you retire, I think it's important that you do what I call test driving your retirement budget. You want to have a feel for what does it feel like to live on that budget, particularly if you're saying, I'm going to cut back. You know, we're currently spending, just to make up numbers, $7,000 a month, and we're going to cut back to $5,000 a month. You know, that's a big change. And you want to make sure while you're still working, before you give notice that you're going to retire, that budget is something that's comfortable and it feels good. Now, if you've been a good saver your whole life, there's probably a bunch of budgets that you can live on, and you'll figure out a way to make it work, but I want you to enjoy your retirement. So test drive that. If you're married, you and your spouse, make sure you're on the same page as to how that felt and whether that's something that you want to do long term. Now, you know, I mentioned earlier that a financial plan gives you the freedom to know that you can spend the money, but know that, you know, you have the freedom to spend the money, but you don't have to spend the money, right? Likely, if you've been frugal the majority of your adult life, you're not going to change that criteria overnight. And you may never change that overnight. So you have the freedom to do it, but think about the things that are bringing you joy. And if you enjoy looking for a deal, and, you know, mea culpa, you know, I fall into that category myself. I like to travel, but I do like to find a good deal on airfare. I do like to find a good deal on my lodging. And to me, it's part of preparing to go to another country and experience the culture. I'll give you another thing. When I travel, when I'm outside of the United States, I prefer to take public transit as opposed to rent a car. It's simpler and it's a great way to meet the locals. So even if my budget said, okay, I can spend $500 for the week and rent a car, I'm still going to go by public transit. And just knowing that that's who I am and giving myself permission to say, even though the budget says I can spend this money, it doesn't mean that I have to spend the money. Okay, the opposite of that, though, is when you're in a country and let's say that there's a tour that you want to take and, you know, the tour is more expensive than you think it should be, I want you to have permission to splurge as well, as long as you're within your budget. And even, you know, if you go outside of your budget every month by, you know, a meaningful amount, $500, $1,000 a month, that can and likely will have an impact on your long-term plan. But if a couple times a year you spend, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 more than budget, is that going to change things? I don't know. You know, none of this is financial advice. I encourage you to work with a financial advisor for your situation. But in general, you know, you're probably fine doing that. So particularly if you err on the side of being a little more frugal. So you have permission to not spend what's in your budget, and you also have permission to splurge occasionally if it's something that you think is going to bring you joy. Okay, and as I said earlier, if you've been frugal pretty much your whole life, is that going to change in retirement? My experience is no. And if it does change, it's going to require an effort on your part in order to make that happen. I've gotten better, but I still tend to be, I like the term minimalist, but I do tend to be more on the frugal side, and I really do enjoy finding a deal. So just understand and give yourself patience and give yourself permission to be who you are. And where it gets difficult, and this is unfortunately often the case, is when there's a couple, if you're married or if you have kids. If it's negatively impacting your spouse, if it's negatively impacting your kids, then, maybe think, is this really serving me? So those are some things to think about on that. And if one tip, while I said, you don't have to spend the money that's in your budget, it might be better for a marriage, it might be better for your family if you did, right? If you have a budget and the budget is conservative and you've worked with a financial advisor and you can spend this money without having to put your retirement at risk, then, even if it puts you a little outside of your comfort zone, think about the impact on the people around you and try to spend the money that you said you were going to spend. Now, I've got a couple suggestions for you. One is, people tend to be savers. Like if I'm working with a family and they say, hey, we want to be able to spend $7,000 a month. You know what? It's very normal if they've been good savers their whole life, that what that means to them is they're going to spend $6,000 a month and save $1,000 a month. But if your financial advisor has run the numbers and said you can spend $7,000 a month, don't feel the need to save part of that. You're no longer in the phase where you're putting money into your retirement account, and this can be hard to do. You're at the phase now where it's time to start taking money out. So if part of your plan is you're going to save part of that monthly amount just because it's what you do, I've got two suggestions for you. One is, depending on how important it is to you, if you want to spend that money, just say, okay, at the end of the year, if we didn't spend what we said we were going to spend, we're going to give half of that to charity or all of the difference to charity. And if you're really committed to wanting to spend it, that's the easy way I just shared. Give some of it, a fourth of it, half of it, all of it to a charity. That's the easy way to do it. You want to know the hard way to do it? Make a donation to a political candidate that you disagree with. This is not a political channel, so whichever side of the aisle that you're on. But that almost always works, but it's very painful to do. So. And again, giving yourself permission to still find the good deals and enjoy the journey, because if you've been frugal, you're probably going to enjoy looking for the deals just like I do. And then the thing I want to share with you that many people forget about is your spending is likely not going to stay constant throughout retirement. So if you're spending, when you first retire, if you're spending $7,000, $8,000, whatever, $1,000 a month, whatever the number is, for most people, that spending is going to go down. You've heard it before. You've got the go-go years, then you've got the slow-go years, and then you have the no-go years when we're getting older. And it tends to be a barbell. It tends to be more spending at the beginning of retirement. It can be more spending at the end of retirement, depending on what your health situation is. That tends to be the expense. People forget that if you're over 65 years old, even outside of Medicare, the average person can expect to be spending a little over $155,000 in total during their lifetime. So for a married couple, that's over $300,000. So that can be expensive, but know that there's it tends to be a barbell, and there's a big period in the middle there where you're going to spend less. So if it's making you uncomfortable to spend what your plan said that you could spend, just know that that spending's likely going to go down in a few years, and you're going to miss the years where you could go out and do those adventures where you're spending that money. And speaking of enjoying your money, I want you to think about watching this video here, which are 7 things to stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy the journey more. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.